Hey guys, I want to talk about trapped air in the forks, and want to explain a little bit about what it is and what you need to do about it. And I mainly want to focus on forks that do not have bleeder valves. So right here I have two examples of bikes. These are e-bikes of mine, and both of them have a Zeb fork. But this Zeb fork is a newer Zeb fork, and this fork actually has this bleeder valve right here, which you put your finger on it and mash it, and it bleeds trapped air out of the fork. This bike, which also has a Zeb fork on it, but this Zeb fork does not have a bleeder valve on it. Now, the way the forks are designed, both the forks can get trapped air down in the lowers. And to get that trapped air out, it's much easier on the one with the bleeder valve, but what do you do about the one that doesn't have the bleeder valve? To help just drive home the point here, I created a little diagram, and basically this is a pretty primitive diagram, but this right here represents the lower fork. The fork lower is what it's called. This going down into the fork lower is the stanchion, and this is the other stanchion. On the top of the fork is the damper, which would be the compression and the rebound dampening. The compression dampening up here, and the rebound dampening down here. Up here is the Schrader valve, where you put the air in and out of the fork, and down at the bottom would be the very bottom of the fork lower, where there's a screw that attaches to a shaft that has a piston in it, and the stanchion moves up and down, and how fast it moves up and down is basically determined by the air that you put into this tube, this stanchion tube. And that air, in this example, is represented by the green lines here. So this would be air pressure set by the rider. So you can set this air pressure on this green side by the Schrader, putting air in or out at the Schrader valve and then measuring it. These right here, these double lines here, are the gasket. It's normally a black or a green gasket that's at your fork where the stanchion comes into the lower. Now, the yellow right in here, this represents a air chamber in the fork. This air chamber in the fork, you really have no way to put air into this chamber. This chamber is created when the stanchion goes down into the fork lower, and it's sealed off by the gasket or seal in the top part of the fork. What will happen as you ride your bike, this air pressure in here can increase. It can increase most likely because of changes in altitude, but it can also change based on just the operation of the fork. So what the Schrader or what the valve that's shown on the fork, this valve right here that's on this newer fork, is designed to, when you mash the button, it releases that air that's shown in that yellow diagram on the fork. And as I said, this particular fork here does not have a pressure release valve. So when the air builds up in this yellow diagram in this fork, you can't release it unless we're going to talk about how you release this. And if you don't release it, what will happen is, over time, the fork will become harsher and harsher. It'll become harder and harder because it's creating an air chamber in here that's preventing the lower from moving because the pressure gets greater and greater. So, you'll know it when you have it because you'll feel it, and no matter what you do with this air pressure, you can't really get that out. So the way people typically address this is they take a zip tie and take this and stick it down right on the seal just like this, and press it down into that seal, and that will cause there to be a gap between the seal and that air chamber, and that will release the air that's caught in the yellow part of my diagram. What I've found, though, there are two problems with this method. One, it can be very difficult to press this into the seal, and second, most of the time when you determine that you've got problems with the air pressure, you're into a long ride, and if you don't have a zip tie on you to release the pressure, you've got a problem. So what I found is that a zip tie can be too thick to get in there, and really to do it right, what you need to do is get a zip tie and cut it off right just like this, where the end of the zip tie starts to become thick. What you want to do is you want to cut it off at an angle so that you've got a point on the zip tie, just like this. Okay, so you get a good point on the zip tie. Then you take the zip tie and you basically sand it down. So this is a piece of sandpaper. You sand it down and get it nice and thin. Now what I've done here is I have one that I've already, I'm pulling it out here, I've already done that to, where I don't know if you can see the very tip, but where I've sanded it down. Once you do that, then when you stick it into the seal, it'll go right in there, and you can push it. If it's a small enough zip tie, it'll have enough firmness so you can push it, and it will go into the seal relatively easy. If it's too big, it's very hard to get it in there. You can, but so that one goes right in there, okay? So that'll allow it to release the pressure. And then what I do is I want to have this so that I can, whenever I need it, so I put a little zip tie on the brake line or on the shifter line, and then I just stick this zip tie right in that, whoops here. Let me come back to you here. I'll show you. I'm not sure I can do it with just one hand. And there you go, where I've pushed the zip tie into the other little zip tie. Then I've got it right on my front of my bike. And just before when I get the bike up to the top of the hill, I can easily pull it off, stick it in there, release the pressure, stick it back, and I know where it is. So I hope that helps you. If you've got a fork, an older fork that does not have one of the pressure release valves, that's one way to deal with the problem. You'll have a zip tie that'll easily go in there and release the pressure. And if you put it on your bike like I did, you'll have it right on the bike right when you need it. Also, if for some reason you're out on the trail and you need a zip tie, well, you can take the one that you were going to use for your bleeder valve and use it to fix up whatever problem you've got where you need a zip tie. So I hope that gave you something to think about and see here, and I will see you guys at the top.